So welcome back, everybody. We'll do our 3 refuge chanting slowly, as we often do at the beginning of our Buddhist studies classes. I put it into the chat for those of you online, and those in the room, we have copies up front if you need it. And just as a reminder, we are taking refuge in Buddha. Buddha means to be awake. So in terms of cultivating wholesome relationships, or to imagine wholesomeness without being awake, really sensitive. I mentioned last time, I believe that a wholesome way of relating to others, to ourselves and others, it doesn't arise out of having a plan. It arises out of being sensitive, being awake. And we're awake to the way it is. And the way it is, we can say it's a relational world. We're always relating. We're always in relationship with each other, with ourselves, with the world, with what's arising. And when we're Buddha, being awake to Dhamma, then what arises is what we call Sangha. Sangha, in a more superficial sense, means like a monastic or somebody who's really devoted to practice. But in the deeper sense, Sangha is our way of being, our way of relating, our way of engaging when there is that intimacy of Buddha being awake to Dhamma the way it is. So that our engagement, our thoughts and words and actions are arising out of that soft and wide and open connection, moment by moment. So let's do the chanting now. Buddha Saranang Gacchami Dhammang Saranang Gacchami Sanghang Saranang Gacchami Dutiyampi Buddhang Saranang Gacchami Dutiyampi Dhammang Saranang Gacchami Dutiyampi Sanghang Saranang Gacchami Tatiyampi Buddhang Saranang Gacchami Tatiyampi Dhammang Saranang Gacchami Tatiyampi Sanghang Saranang Gacchami. We'll settle into our meditation posture. coming into relationship with this sitting, breathing body. And we notice the tendencies of the mind. Maybe some of us have the tendency to be idealistic, to try to be with the body in a romantic way, some ideal. One of my teachers made the very powerful point that the practice, the Buddhist teachings are neither optimistic nor pessimistic. The practice is all about being realistic. And to be realistic, we need to be open and connected and intimate in that soft and deep and wide sense. Nothing left out. All in. And we get to practice now with the experience of the body. Or maybe more specifically with the way this body is sensitive to sound and sight and smell and taste and touch. Sometimes the way of relating is wanting to give up on the body, wanting to deny it, to turn away, to be numb or distracted. Other times the way of relating might be have more the flavor of controlling, trying to fix, trying to get to some experience. But it's really up to each of us in our own practice to uncover what is a wise and kind way to be showing up and relating to what we call the body, the sitting body, the breathing body, the hearing and seeing body, the feeling body. And the healthy, the wholesome way of relating is discerned in the here and now, through the absence of harm, through the absence of heaviness and contraction. Doesn't mean that there isn't pain, but are we relating to the pain in a way that adds pain? Or that meets the pain, minimizes the pain by not adding to it, not compounding the unavoidable pain that sometimes arises in the body and mind. And we often find that it's helpful to begin with humility, so that instead of following a plan about how to practice, we emphasize the listening or the opening more and more. And in this way, we find our way one moment at a time, learning through trial and error how to be kind and wise as we come into relationship with the body, the sitting body, the thinking mind. what to do with this human life as it's arising right now, how to relate, what way of relating seems to be onward leading toward healing and releasing and peacefulness, and what ways of relating go the other way, are stressful and entangling, heavy. And it's in this way we take responsibility for our own learning. Truth is that we'll be with this body, always changing, of course, but we're going to be with this body, this embodied state, for a long time. So we have every incentive to bring some humility and to allow this deep learning about how to be with the body, how to be in relationship with the body. How to not be trapped by the dominant habits or patterns that may or may not be helpful. So just to review, we're sitting aware that there is this body and that unavoidably the knowing mind is in relationship to this sensitive body, to the sensations and the sounds and the sights and the smells and the tastes that are coming and going. And naturally being curious about a wise and kind, a healing way to be relating. What's helpful, what's not helpful. And the learning then is in real time, because we'll feel the stress of relating in unskillful ways, and we'll naturally feel the release in those moments of relating in a skillful way. So for the remainder of the set, let's just see what can be learned. Take a moment, stretch the body as you need to. Good to see everybody here tonight, and big thanks to Maggie, who's doing technology for this Buddhist Studies course, and Chuck, who's here to be the program host. Ryan has offered to be the program host next week, and we do need 2 more program hosts for week 4 and week 5. So if you're interested, let me know. Ryan and I can train you in next week, even if you're brand new. It's not hard. It's just helping set up and close down the building at the end of the evening. And also mention now, week 2, just a reminder that part of the practice here at Common Ground is to receive the programs, the classes as a free gift, generously offered because of all the community has done over the years to provide a building and the technology, these teachings having been passed down generation by generation. Common Ground, I mean, we do have paid staff, but there's a lot of volunteers that make this place happen. And so when we have a course like this that's offered freely, we actually have to practice receiving it as a free gift, no strings attached. It should, the idea is supposed to make us happy that it's offered freely, not suspicious, like what's going on here. And then the idea is that some may feel like giving back, whether it's volunteering time, cleaning the building, or being a program host, or contributing money so we can pay the paid staff, or take care of our buildings here in the retreat center in Wisconsin. And in that way, it kind of works. And it has worked for 32 years now. We started in 1993, so it's been a long time operating this way. And it's actually a way of protecting the organization and the community. And we operate in a frugal manner, so we don't have to worry about like fundraising or doing programs that generate a lot of cash. You know, we can actually teach and have programs that, from our own experience, are helpful, you know, and lead to freedom and a wiser and a kinder way of being in relationship with the world, instead of, you know, what might inspire generosity or something like that. So if you want to know more about that, you can go to the website, or you can contact Gabe Keller-Flores, our operations manager, or Nancy Bowler, our bookkeeper, or you could always talk to Shelley or myself if you want to know more about how that all works. Chuck is here tonight. You can check in with Chuck at the end of the program as well. So we're discussing these 5 weeks, and then later in the fall, Shelley taking up the same subject for another 5 weeks, cultivating wholesome relationships. And as I mentioned last week, it might be better said that we're cultivating wholesome ways of relating to each other, relating to ourselves, relating to our body, relating to the moment. We're always in relationship. This is a relational world. Any moment of an experience is a moment of relating, of being in relationship with that moment. There's a knowing mind, a sensitive heart in relationship to whatever it is that's being known or felt in that moment, unceasingly, forever, and on and on. And then all of these moments of relating, it's always in the context of unresolved pain. You know, our human condition, hopefully this isn't a surprise to too many of us, our human condition, you know, as we start to pay more attention in our lives, we realize, we feel, it's not something we figure out cognitively, but as we open more and get interested in relating to the present moment, there's a sense of something, a tangle, a weight, an uneasiness, a burning, a heaviness, right? Something unresolved. And that's our human condition. We have experience where things arise, and the mind that is in relationship with whatever it is that's arising isn't capable of meeting that experience that's arising. Too much joy, too much pain, too much whatever. So we have all these sort of, understandable but not really helpful habits of relating, where we basically bury and deny and hide and run and paste over some idea as a way, inefficient, but as a way to keep ourselves safe, that actually ends up perpetuating the uneasiness and the heaviness and the burning and what remains unresolved in our lives and in our world then. We have this sort of basic principle, when we're hurting, what do? We tend to hurt others, don't we? It just goes round and around like that. So I thought I'd start this evening by reading from a book. I mentioned one book last week by John Wellwood. Oh boy, I'm forgetting the name of it. It will come to me. But this one is by Stephen and Andrea Levine. Some of you might know of them. Important teachers. They were practitioners in this, at least Stephen Levine was, in this style of Buddhism, lineage of Buddhism. But he did a lot of work, both in terms of relationship, but even more so around the dying process. Anyway, together they wrote a book, Embracing the Beloved, Relationship as a Path of Awakening. And this is right at the beginning. I think it's making this point about brokenness, and just as the place from which our ways of relating arise. And no wonder that often our ways of relating to each other and to ourselves and to experience are off because they're arising out of unresolved pain often. So they write, the distance from your pain, your grief, your unattended wounds is the distance from your partner. And we could say not just our partners or a partner, but our friends, our families, and really all things. So the distance from our pain, from what's unresolved, then it gets acted out as the distance we are from each other. And they go on and write, and the distance from your partner is the distance from the living truth, your own great nature. Whatever maintains that distance, that separation from ourselves and our beloveds, must be investigated with mercy and awareness. This distance is not overcome by one giving up their space to another, but by both entering together in the unknown between them. The mind creates the abyss, but the heart crosses it. A conscious relationship teaches us to treat ourselves and others as our only child. Remember that. Some of you probably remember that line from the Metta Sutta. Even as a mother protects with her life her child, her only child, so with a boundless heart should one cherish all living beings, radiating kindness over the entire world, spreading upwards to the skies and downwards to the depths, outwards and unbounded, freed from hatred and ill will. And it goes on, whether standing, walking, sitting, or lying down, free from drowsiness, one should sustain this recollection. This is said to be the sublime abiding. So even as a mother protects with her life her child, her only child, so with a boundless heart should one cherish all living beings. So that attitude of kindness should be protected, just like one would protect their only child. That attitude, like And we sort of know this, that intuition, that ill will is not the way. I mean, we fall into the habits of ill will, right? But don't we feel probably deep into our bones that ill will is not the way to go, is not onward leading? Understandable that that attitude gets triggered, that it's seductive, that the mind gets caught in it. But as soon as there's some space, some sense, oh, I'm really caught, right? There's also that discernment that this isn't helpful. Hating, whatever we hate, hating the kitchen cabinet door that we bumped into, it's like, it's ridiculous. There's a simile that's used in the Buddhist tradition of somebody rowing a boat late at night, ramming into another boat, cursing out, the person in the other boat, you idiot, did you see me coming? Finally, he takes out his lantern and realizes there's nobody in the other boat. It was just floating there in the river or the lake, whatever. And that's it's just this sense of being triggered by life not being the way we want it to be, the other person not being the way we want them to be, or the situation to be. But that's the thing about ill will. When we get right down to it, there's really not a target. We need a target to get angry. But when we look, we just find nature and nature and nature, like we peel back the layers and it's just causes and conditions. There may be a politician that you're angry with, or there may be a person at work you're angry with, or there may be somebody you're, a friend, family member, another animal that is causing you problems. I noticed our neighbor, they had somebody trying to get rid of I'm not sure what it was, squirrels in the attic or something like that, but they had a crew out there. And I spoke with some longtime community members the other day. They live a little bit north of the cities, and they had bats, and it like really freaked them out. It was like not easy to get rid of bats when they get inside the house, in the attic or wherever they were. And in moments, we can have vivid anger. But when we have a little bit more space, we realize, well, the bats are just doing what they're doing. Or that boss is just doing what they're doing, or that politician, or that, they're acting out their own unresolved pain. And the thing about unresolved pain, it distorts our capacity to perceive clearly the way it is, right? When we're hurting. Because what do we do when we're hurting? We disconnect, right? Because we don't want to be sensitive when we're hurting. We don't mind being sensitive when we feel good, but when we're hurting, it's like, and yet, how can that be a strategy for navigating our lives to be disconnected? It's like driving home, but keeping your eyes closed. It doesn't make sense. If we're going to live our life and we want to be safe and not cause harm, we have to be really connected. We have to be sensitive. We have to feel in that open, that soft, open and wide, deep way. But people who are hurting, we don't want to do that, do we? So just let me finish this last paragraph that I stopped. A conscious relationship teaches us to treat ourselves and others as our only child and to do it mindfully. It does not break the heart. A conscious relationship is as healing and life-affirming as an unconscious, old-style relationship is at times harmful and life-denying. The harmful effects of an unconscious relationship is that it keeps us so small, dependent on external circumstances for our happiness. More needs than gifts are brought into such an entanglement. But a conscious relationship offers the possibility of relating across the gulf of I and other, all the way into the heart of our beloved. A conscious relationship allows us to remain conscious while in relationship. It's a whole new ballgame. And I think I mentioned this last week, but more than, just to be honest with ourselves, more than relating to another person or to a group of people, or we're really relating to our own projection, our own idea. And that's another reason why it's hard to embody. Some of you took the intro class way back, maybe some of you, and I still do, but I'm not really teaching it that much anymore. Other folks at the center are, but I'd often encourage people, just to keep it simple for people who are new to the practice, the coming together of these two qualities of being alert and being relaxed. And that's true whether you're doing sitting meditation or walking or just doing your life practice. Okay, can the mind be awake, alert, bright? Can it be relaxed, the body and mind, allowing? And that can be a useful kind of homework in relationship, instead of, as I've mentioned a couple times, trying to do the relationship correctly or trying to avoid making mistakes. It might be more interesting, like for this course especially, but then forever, to emphasize really being there, being relaxed and vulnerable and comfortable with the uncertainty. That's one of the things we feel when we're interacting with another human being, even if we're not talking, but just like sitting next to somebody. Energetically, we're in relationship with each other, right? We're sharing space. And there's an exposure there because it's uncertain. A lot of times our patterns of relating get triggered because we're afraid of resting in that uncertainty, that uncomfortable uncertainty. So just explore that, like being embodied, like trusting, well, I can at least be in my body. And maybe it feels like we're a frightened animal, but that's how it is. That's how it feels sometimes in our body. Or we feel really armored, or we feel whatever, a great sadness. It's amazing what sometimes we feel, and it's not, we want to kind of assume that I'm feeling this because of what's going on in this moment, but we're actually feeling it because it's what's gone on, it's what's left over or unresolved from all the moments, right? The great ocean of what's hasn't been fully digested, you could say. Oh, that's how it feels now. And if we're not willing to feel that brokenness, that, you may not like that word brokenness, and that's okay. You can come up with your own. But if we're unwilling to feel whatever's there to feel, then our habit of not wanting to feel it is going to skew our relationship, whatever we're relating to in that moment. It's going to affect it in an unconscious way. And it's like the tangle within, the tangle without. What do we do with this tangle? These repeated cycles of samsara that we see in our individual relationships, and we see these patterns in the greater world that we live in. So just that first step of experimenting, exploring the possibility of softening and widening, allowing to some degree that dropping away of armor, or that trusting that I should be afraid or I should be guarded. And just start with easy relationships, just ordinary things of sitting next to somebody on the bus or chatting about the weather with your neighbor, or, and just really use the experience of the body. Like it's not even as heavy of a trip of I'm relaxing with you, this other person. No, no, no. You're having some interaction with another person or a group of people, and you're relaxing with your body. You're trusting being in a body, first and foremost. Because this is the thing about these patterns of relating. How I'm relating to my body, like right now, because we're all relating right now together. And if I'm unconscious of my body, that's affecting the way that or at least I'm relating to this moment and to each other, for me relating to you. Or if I'm averse to my body, or if I'm mistrusting my body, it's sort of like, it's not like we can have different relationships or different ways of relating in a given moment, where we're loving our body but hating everything else around us. I mean, that's that's what we discover with metta, loving kindness, is it's inclusive. So if I bring a good friend of mine, or I just bring something to mind that brings up that beautiful quality of goodwill and loving kindness, it starts to affect all of what I'm in relationship with in that moment, doesn't it? Everything is affected, and it's the same with ill will. If something triggers some ill will in me right now, I'm going to start getting suspicious about you guys. What are you thinking? And I'll get suspicious about what I'm feeling in my body. Why is my knee hurting? Is my knee out to get me? Why does this always happen to me? Why didn't I pee before the class? When is this going to be over? I can't wait. It's so that just as this homework for this class, when we're exploring, like, what does it mean to cultivate more wholesome ways of relating, then just use that experiment of being in the body, and just to start with something really easy invitation to relax and to be alert, to be interested, to appreciate sensitivity instead of feeling put off by sensitivity, which we often are, because it can feel too much. But we want to start realizing that there's really no way onward, leading to sort of wiser, kinder, more liberated states, more released states of being without sensitivity. Because the opposite of sensitivity, like the not valuing sensitivity, means by default we're valuing numbness and disconnection, right? That, of course, doesn't make sense as a strategy for living. Okay, I got this life, got a mind and body, got circumstances, whatever, cultural position. And I think what I'll do is I'll really double down on numbness and disconnection. I mean, we do that unconsciously, but, it doesn't make sense. And sometimes we catch it in ourselves and sometimes in others, like we'll look back and we'll go, oh, I did this much these last few days. I've been gravitating towards this pattern. And we'll kind of get a sense of, oh, that's becoming my habit. To avoidance is my habit. Shutting down is my habit. Turning away is my habit. When I'm interacting with people, like, have you caught yourself where you're just interacting with someone, but through this sort of pattern, you're not really there with them? You just like put in a tape on autopilot, and that interaction is sort of, they're not really, I don't have the bandwidth to show up for you, or you're not worth me showing up for you in this moment. So the general point here is that if we're going to be interested in cultivating wise and kind ways of relating, and ways of relating that are onward leading to freedom, to more and more freedom in life, it has to begin with this realistic relationship with our brokenness, the unresolved pain in our lives. And when we have a more honest relationship with our unresolved pain, then we can have a more honest relationship, a more kind relationship, compassionate relationship with everybody else's unresolved pain. I'm not sure the best way to say this, but I've tried saying it to people in the past, and it not always very successful. But like when people come to me and are just talking about challenges in the relational world, and especially places where there are power differentials. And what I sometimes say to people is to start practicing where it's easy, not necessarily where it's hardest, but start where it's easy. When you see people, you're seeing their brokenness, you're seeing their unresolved pain. Because it's really helpful. It's like brings us into the moment. We can do it even now. Do we imagine that there's anybody in this room or anybody on Zoom that has completely resolved all of the pain in their life? All of the moments of betrayal or insult or confusion or doubt or whatever has plagued them or weighed them down. Have we all digested that perfectly well and the heart is completely light and unburdened? No. We have our doubts, we have our fears, we have our longings and our needs. This is the human experience. And it really sort of challenges this idea, which I think is good to challenge, about what is perfection. Like, are we interested in perfection? What do we mean by, like, even using Buddhist terms, like, what do we mean by liberation? Because we can imagine that somehow I'm really good. I'm sure you've seen this because it's such a powerful and often misunderstood symbol in Buddhism of the lotus, right? And do you know about the reason why the lotus is often the symbol? Like, it can be misunderstood as a kind of transcendence, like the lotus flower, it's in the muck of a swamp or a pond, often a murky, stagnant pond. And those water lilies or lotuses, they grow out of the mud. And then the leaves and the flower, they're beautiful. And they have that quality where nothing really adheres to them, not even water. If you watch those little lily pads or lotus leaves and flowers, if it rains, the water just sort of beads off them, let alone the muck. But the point isn't that they're somehow out of the muck. The point is that they found a way of relating to the muck that's beautiful. Here's the passage. It's from the Therigatha, which there's a Therigatha and the Therigatha, which are two collections of the poems of the early nuns and monks around the time of the Buddha. And often as they got old, the monks and nuns that had finished the practice had the deep insight as the Buddha did, they would write a little poem or a little passage about their practice and their experience of awakening. And that's where this comes from. So one of the monks, Udayan was his name. This is part of his poem as an old practitioner. And it's translated this way: as the flower of the lotus arisen in water blossoms, pure, scented, and pleasing, the mind, yet is not drenched by the water. In the same way, born in the world, the Buddha abides in the world, and like the lotus by water, he does not get drenched by the world. You know, like that line from the Bible, I think goes, you know, in the world, but not of the world. Right? So it's a common idea. And it's like in our course this fall, it's really, yeah, I'm in a relationship with you and you and you know, my cat, my partner, you know, all the people we're in relationship with. I'm in relationship. And each particular relationship is perfectly imperfect or appropriately imperfect or naturally imperfect. It's messy because we're navigating all kinds of difference around power and, you know, all the ways that we're different by race, by gender, by just so many things that on this sort of basic level really matter, these differences. And so interacting through all that difference and all that unresolved pain, why would we expect them to fit some ideal? But what can be truly beautiful is the non-confusion with the messiness. So what does that mean? You know, and as I mentioned in the guided sit, you know, just working with our way of relating to the body, it's not something we're going to figure out cognitively. Like those of you who write poetry, you know, you might come up with some great lines about that way of relating that is so, but hopefully those lines are coming out of experience and not just, that's a nice turn of phrase. You know, I like the way that sounds. I like the way those words roll off my mouth or something like that. Like, what is that? What are those moments where we really are relaxed and sensitive and awake and alert and undefended and not deluded by what is unresolved, the unclear, and awkward. You know, think about any day, let alone week, last month, last year. How many times has my attitude been like some version of I'm not here? You know, this is just too complicated. This is just too messy. You know, and we want to minimize the relationship. We want to get off the call. We want to leave the meeting. We want to not take that call or not, you know, go to that meeting or not have that interaction in the future. You know, see the person coming and we go the other way, right? Don't we do that sometimes? Or, you know, even at the store, I know that cashier, and that was a weird, I'm going to go to this register or something like that. Just like, or dread. We see that email that we haven't responded to 1 day, 2 day, 3 days, 4 days, you know, and it's like, what we want in that moment is like a lot of compassion and forgiveness. Like, hey, honey, I totally get this is uncomfortable, but does it make it any better to deny it or run from it or pretend that it can be avoided? Is that onward leading? Does it lead anywhere? How's that working? It doesn't work. So how do we become that lotus? Mud and the stench of a stagnant swamp or whatever. There's this line from John Wellwood, we're not just human beings learning to become Buddhas, but also Buddhas waking up in human form, learning to become fully human. Right? That's a really nice turning, like the line from one of Rumi's poems that was translated to English, you know, not a drop realizing the ocean, but the ocean realizing how to be a drop. And so what that means, like I think that how we practice, or how I practice at least, is like in relationship, and especially those, not the most sticky, but situations that are somewhat sticky in the sense that they're stimulating some tension or anxiety or rushing through the interaction. But to be curious about what is freedom, what might freedom feel like, look like, be like here? And that's where that, well, it would be released, it would be relaxed, wouldn't it? And it would be embracing of sensitivity, not afraid of sensitivity. And the sensitivity has both a breadth to it and a depth to it. And when I say, choosing situations that are relatively easy, I mean that. Like you would think it would be easy. Wynn, got a cat a long time ago, and we've had other cats before this cat. And I like cats, but I would probably not choose to have a cat. But I noticed, I mean, I have a nice relationship with this cat. I mean, I really consider it a friend. And but I noticed, like, which is not uncommon, even because I do it with people too. But I just noticed, like, it's so interesting how easy it is for me not to be there when we're interacting, or to feel put upon, in the interactions. It's just so, and like that's how we practice this during this course. It's like, get interested in that. Like, this is a moment of relating. And what is this setting emotion like in terms of those repeated patterns of samsara? Because how we're relating to our body right now, how we're relating to our mood right now, how we're relating to the temperature in the room, how we're relating to the cat, how we're relating to the water we're drinking. That's all the training ground, because it's so much easier to train at these more simple levels than when we're at work interacting with someone with a power differential, because they report to us or I report to them. So we want to start where it's relatively easy to like be fully embodied, to be really curious and really embracing of the sensitivity. There's a great little story from Ajahn Chah where when he was a younger monk and really wanting to be the perfect monk, and so many of the rules that the nuns and monks have, hundreds, have to do with how they're relating to others. And it was just feeling a little overwhelming for somebody who wanted to do everything just right. So he finally he'd been looking for this teacher for a while who was really into seclusion, Ajahn Mun, really important figure in the Thai forest tradition. He died maybe in, I forget exactly when he died, maybe late 50s, 1950s. And yeah, really powerful figure. But anyway, he finally ran into him somewhere out in the sort of remote areas in northern Thailand, and had this question he'd been wanting to ask. It seems kind of simplistic, like basically were there so many rules and it's hard to know, what to emphasize, and all, and he just went on and on like this. And Ajahn Mun said, well, when you're in doubt, just pause. Just pause. It's like if you're clear about what's wholesome or what's unwholesome, then act on that clarity. But when you're not clear, just pause and refrain from that. And that's such a good thing, because like when we're in relationship with someone, we don't like that uncertainty, do we? I catch myself a lot, and I'm sure this isn't just me, but where we'll try one thing and just a little unsure whether that was the appropriate way to be relating or speaking to someone, and then we'll try it again, as opposed to just getting quiet, you know. But it's awkward. It's unpleasant because we're going to feel our lack of understanding or lack of clarity about what to say, or whether we've been skillful or not. Like that we're not covering it up by deflection or keep talking. We're just sort of hanging out in that space. And it can be really powerful in that space, because we can have like a powerfully honest moment where, like, oh, it isn't easy being a human being. I mean, some version of that together. And not always the other person is going to be able to meet us in that space, but it doesn't matter, because we can meet ourselves in that space. Whether or not the other person can meet us there, at least we can model being real with our experience in that moment. I don't really know what I'm talking about, or I don't really know what to say here. Maybe we should just leave it here, and we'll pick it up later maybe. But that we don't do that very often, do we? Because we like a pretend resolve better than that very clear resolve that we don't know what we're doing here. Or that clear resolve that things are unresolved. And we'll give it another go, perhaps at another time. Or maybe we'll know that it's unresolved and we'll deflect for a while, and then we'll come back to this. Give it another go. So I want to just take a little time to review the precepts so that you can work with them. And what I thought for the next few weeks, so I'll spend the last 10 minutes, 15 minutes talking about the first two precepts and how we might work with them in our interactions and our relationships with each other. And Wynn Fricke is going to teach for me next Monday night, because I'll be teaching out in Washington State at Cloud Mountain, teaching a retreat with Kamala Master, some of you know, wonderful teacher. So Wynn will be here, and she'll teach on wise speech and how these teachings from the Buddha had a lot to say about wise speech, and how that can just illuminate this important part of our practice of relationship. And then the last 2 weeks, week 4 and 5, will cover wise livelihood, and the third precept, which is undertaking the training to refrain from sexual misconduct, but also looking just generally at relationships with power differentials too. So that will probably be week 5, and week 4 will be wise livelihood. Like, how do we navigate this space? We're an animal, whether we know it or not, that wants to survive. And the way we do that in our situation generally is you get a job, or you, one way or another, find ways to feed yourself and shelter yourself and belong, and just navigate these needs that we humans have. And how do we do that in a way that doesn't create unresolved pain, unresolved suffering, and helps to resolve what is unresolved? How do we allow ourselves to be an animal who wants to survive? Because the answer isn't to deny that we're an animal that wants to survive. It's like, that's the muck that the lotus has to grow in. We are an animal with a body and a mind that wants to survive, right? And we're also a mammal that wants to belong, right? And we're a sexual being that wants to connect on, wants to have some kind of sexual relationships generally. And so many other things that just comes with the territory of being a human being. So that's the sort of general outline. And so tonight, let's just look at the first two precepts. And one of the handouts in the emails that I've been sending out to the group is Common Ground's precept, refuge and precept ceremony. So it's just the traditional precepts and refuges that we chanted at the beginning, the refuges. And the precepts, these 5 trainings, they're in that ceremony, in that sheet that you can print up for yourself. It has Thich Nhat Hanh, some of you know, a wonderful teacher, Vietnamese Buddhist monk who died a couple of years ago, and really important teacher. And Vietnamese Buddhism is sometimes called 4 schools because it's both this early Buddhist tradition that we practice here at Common Ground, also Mahayana, also Zen, and also Pure Land Buddhism. Just because of geographically where Vietnam is, it was influenced by these different Buddhist lineages. So Thich Nhat Hanh was kind of wonderfully versed in sort of different Buddhist lineages and ways of thinking about things, and had a lot of confidence too about creating community. It's really one of his superpowers. I was just talking to somebody who's considering doing some training in that tradition and possibly even ordaining as a monastic in that tradition, because there are a number of monasteries here in the States as well as other places around the world. Yeah, and just have the thoughtfulness of and understanding the importance, like how much our different relationships, if used properly, can illuminate what we need to see. Right? Because the whole path, the whole spiritual path, like when we go on a retreat and we're not interacting very much or practicing in a secluded place, we're using various spiritual tools, spiritual conventions to illuminate what's not so easy to see about the nature of our own mind and experience. But there's another very, very powerful way. It's messier, but it's no less powerful way to illuminate what we're not seeing. And that's to engage with other human beings. And the stereotype is that when somebody's practice, like even in the kind of classic monastic, experience, is that when a monk or a nun's experience or practice is getting really deep, well, they make them the abbess or the abbot of the monastery, and they got all the complications that come with that, leadership and power differentials and all the projection that people project onto authority figures and all of that, and on and on. So getting to the precepts. Let me just read. This is what the Buddha says about the precepts. I love this. This is translated by Bhikkhu Bodhi, a wonderful Western translator, Buddhist monk. And this is the Buddha's discourse on the 5 precepts. There are, O practitioners, 8 streams of merit, streams of wholesome nourishments of happiness that are heavenly, ripening in happiness, conducive to heaven, and that lead to whatever is wished for, loved, and agreeable to one's welfare and happiness. What are the 8? Now, are you interested? It's quite a setup. Here, practitioner, a noble disciple has gone for refuge to the Buddha. This is the first stream of merit, stream of wholesome nourishment of happiness that is heavenly, ripening in happiness, conducive to heaven, and that leads to whatever is wished for, loved, and agreeable to one's welfare and happiness, right? It doesn't mean that we revere this person who died, 2,600 years ago. It means we're interested in being awake. That's what Buddha means, right? Buddha, the historic person, is sort of, in our tradition, he's our teacher. He sort of stands for what a human can do. They can be awake. That means you and I can be awake. So we take refuge in that possibility. And we can be awake to what? Dhamma. So that's the next treasure, right? Further, a noble disciple has gone for refuge to the Dhamma, the Dharma. This is the second stream of merit that leads to whatever is wished for, and so on and so on. Further, a noble disciple has gone for refuge to the Sangha, right? This awakened activity, when Buddha is awake to Dhamma, when we're intimate with the way it is, then our way of relating is going to be Sangha. It's going to be a wise and appropriate, nimble, creative way of relating. And that's also a third stream of merit that leads to whatever is wished for, loved, agreeable to one's welfare and happiness. And now he's going to talk about the precepts. He says, there are further practitioners, these 5 gifts, pristine, of long-standing, traditional, ancient, unadulterated, and never before adulterated, that are not being adulterated, that will not be adulterated, not despised by wise ascetics. What are these 5 gifts? Here, practitioner, a noble disciple gives up the destruction of life and abstains from it. By abstaining from the destruction of life, the noble disciple gives to immeasurable beings freedom from fear, hostility, and oppression. By giving to immeasurable beings freedom from fear, hostility, and oppression, they themselves will enjoy immeasurable freedom from fear, hostility, and oppression. This is the first of these great and fourth stream of merit, great gifts and the fourth stream of merit. So I like how he says that, when we undertake the training to refrain from harming, we're giving the gift of safety, of non-fear to those who are around. But I see, like, I'm sure this is, some of you do the same thing, but when I'm hiking, or if I'm trying to get a fly out of the house, I'll certainly feel, and I'll often say out loud, hey, I'm not trying to harm you in any way. I'm going to do whatever I can not to harm you, right? Or if I see a deer, and I'm just walking by, and, they seem to be content eating whatever they're eating, it's like, hey, you don't have to run for me. I'm not going to harm you. That's a gift. Or even as a male walking at dusk, and if there's somebody who looks like a woman walking, I'll have that energy. I won't say it out loud, but I'll have that energy like, I am not going to do you any harm. You do not need to be afraid of me. Right? Just that kind of, it's like a beautiful gift. And then we start to feel safe giving that gift. That's the training, undertaking that training to not harm. So that's one thing besides that first part of the homework, which is just to work with embodiment whenever you're interacting with somebody, that widening and softening and the alertness, like embracing the sensitivity. Then to just get interested in that, like that deep resolve, like, I don't know if I can do it. I probably won't do it perfectly. I know I won't do it perfectly, but I resolve to not harm, to not kill, to do my best, and to keep starting over when I forget or make a mistake or am too rushed and I cause harm with my words, with my thoughts, with my actions. And just start to notice what that sets in motion. And then he goes on to the second one, the second precept. So a lot of you know these precepts. We do them often at the center, and for sure we do them whenever we do a Buddhist retreat here at the center. Further practitioner, further practitioner, a noble disciple, gives up the taking of what is not given and abstains from it. By abstaining from taking what is not given, the noble disciple gives to immeasurable beings freedom from fear. And then similar to that first one, this is the second of those great gifts and the fifth stream of merit. Right? So we undertake the training to refrain from taking what hasn't been given. Now, this is sort of interesting. Like, what does that mean, to refrain from what hasn't been given? So let me read the two reflections from Thich Nhat Hanh that I was mentioning, because he talks about each of these in a way that might be clarifying, like how to use these. So for the first precept on non-harming, Thich Nhat Hanh says, aware of the suffering caused by and you have this in your precept ceremony, so you can print this if you want. So the precept again, the first one is, I undertake the training to refrain from harming living beings or from killing living beings. Aware of the suffering caused by the destruction of life, I'm committed to cultivating compassion and learning ways to protect the lives of all beings. Now remember, it's a training, it's not about being perfect. And just to get curious, like as you're hearing this, like, well, what might that look like? What comes to mind as I'm hearing this? And you might read this every day, for example. I'm determined not to kill, not to let others kill, and not to condone any act of killing in the world, in my thinking, and in my way of life. This is the first of the 5 mindfulness trainings, and I vow to study and practice it. So you might, like, just for this period of time, you might just reflect on that every morning, because then it might just show up, like having reflected on that, something might get illuminated later in the day. And then the second precept, which the precept is, I undertake the training to refrain from taking what hasn't been given to me freely. And Thich Nhat Hanh's comment is, or reflection is, aware of the suffering caused by exploitation, social injustice, stealing, and oppression, I'm committed to cultivating loving kindness and learning ways to work for the well-being of others, for the well-being of all beings. I will practice generosity by sharing my time, energy, and material resources with those who are in real need. I'm determined not to steal and not to possess anything that should belong to others. I will respect the property of others, but I will prevent others from profiting from human suffering or the suffering of other species on earth. This is the second of the 5 mindfulness trainings. I vow to study and practice it. Now, the point isn't to beat ourselves up. The point is to use it to get interested, right? To illuminate our actions. Because what's skillful for us is only going to be revealed in the moment. It's not like we can have a perfect map. Okay, this is how I'm going to live my life. These are the kind of choices I'm going to make. No, we need to relax and we need to embrace sensitivity. And then we use the precepts to help illuminate those places where we tend to maybe be on autopilot or not want to be sensitive, to illuminate them. Oh, like I was doing some dusting, and we've got the spiders around the window sills, and just like how I do that, how fast I do that. I was like down in the basement because I was vacuuming something else. I thought I'd get it's like a cremation, not a cremation, but like a cemetery of all the bugs that the spiders eat, and then the debris is sitting there below, and vacuuming them up without the debris up without catching the spiders, And it's like, how fast like if I really care about them, like, can I take another couple minutes to do it a little more slowly just to reduce the odds that I'm going to suck in one of those little paperly thin spiders. I mean, they're so delicate, some of those spiders, right? And it's just like, it's just such an interesting little experiment about our mind and about the causes for happiness. It's not about right or wrong. I mean, we live in a realm as animals where life eats life. So there's no way that we're not going to cause harm, right? Do you understand that? It's not about perfection. It's about like really getting clear we're in the mud. So what does goodness, beauty, freedom look like when we're in the mud, when we're an animal that, where life eats life? What is freedom? How does freedom arise? Does it arise by thinking it doesn't matter? Well, you can try that and see if that leads to happiness. That these kind of seemingly insignificant choices, oh, they don't matter. They're just spiders, or they're just whatever. It's just. So next week, again, we'll reflect on wise speech, and we'll have small groups at the end of that. And you're in the small groups, you could bring up the study of the first two precepts, or it might seem more relevant to share around what Wynn talks about, the wise speech, the Buddhist teachings on wise speech. And then the following week, we'll do wise livelihood, and then wise sexuality. But you can read all of the precepts, and some of you have take them regularly, but they're meant to be mindfulness tools, like to illuminate our relational world. So I would just read through them. I encourage you to look for that link to the Common Grounds precept ceremony. Maybe print off a copy for yourself, leave it by your bedside or on the fridge, and then just read through it every day. It just takes like 2 or 3 minutes, or just focus on one of them and forget the other 4. And just kind of keep it close as you and see how you just start to see more of what's going on, because you got interested in non-harming, or whatever one you get interested in. So let's let go of the words. Just take a few seconds of silence. And thanks for being here tonight, everyone, practicing together. And I'll see you in a couple weeks. Wishing you good practice.
Thank you, Mark.
And